right. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you joining the topic of the day, working toward wealth. So I love this topic. I think talking about this topic is obviously very key as we continue to discuss generational wealth. I really enjoy the topic because, everyone's journey is different and unique. And there is, everyone's path is different. There's obstacles in the way. And we've been able to put together a wonderful panel to kind of take a deeper dive into some of these topics. So I'm looking forward to taking that dive. As we begin, we want to just talk about the agenda. So we'll start with some brief introductions. They'll be brief. We'll take a dive into some questions that kind of the audience presented to us beforehand. So we'll start with some of those to get the conversation going. You have the ability to add in questions as we move forward as well. And we'll see those in the chat and try to interject some of those into the dialogue in real time. And then leave some time on the back end as well to kind of debrief, but also open it up to any questions that listeners may have. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Chairman Dehasi Hill for a brief introduction.
Suguli Swagwek, Dehasi Daze, Nyungyat, Wagaslewage, Nyugi Taloda, Onyotaga, Ni Talankawan, Nage. Thank you for indulging me this morning as we talk about a very important topic. I'm Dehasi Hill, Chairman for Oneida Nation. I'm of the Bear Clan, and I am the elected leader for Oneida Nation. It is a 9-member board with 4 officers and 5 council people. And so I look forward to continuing this discussion. Thank you.
Jeff.
Hey, how's everybody doing? My name is Jeff Mack, first VP over at Park Bank, longtime Madisonian, and just happy to be on the call and happy to get a chance to present with these great fellows on the call now.
And last but certainly not least.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Anthony Hudson. I have the privilege of serving as the head of economic equity for BMO Harris Bank. And like my fellow panelists, really excited about this morning's topic and the dialogue. So thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. So let's dive in, gentlemen. Let's, obviously in the world today, everything's instant gratification. We see a lot of people, we say flexing on social media and whatnot. You see that finished product and there's always steps to getting towards wealth. So that's why I love just the name of this group working towards it. So, just want to throw it back to you, Anthony. Why is it important? I know it seems like such a simple question, but it's a loaded question. Why is it important that we continue to strive to build wealth for ourselves and our families?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. And I think it's multi-layered, right? But I'll share just a quick story of my own story. When I think about some of the things that have afforded me opportunities of where I am today, right? And so I grew up and went to public schools in Cincinnati, Ohio, all the way through middle school. And I had an opportunity, I was blessed with a chance to get a scholarship to a Jesuit high school, St. X High School, Cincinnati, that was life-changing for me. And when I think about that, we received financial assistance. My mom, she was a single mother. There was no way we would have been able to pay for high school education at that time. As a single mom, my mom was working multiple jobs just to get by. But we were blessed with a scholarship for me to be able to attend. And I would say for me personally, that kind of started a domino effect. From high school, I went on to Xavier University for college, which was a feeder system into my college. I built relationships and networks that eventually helped me to get a job at a bank headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio, to make more than a livable wage, to begin to pursue the American dream, right? Went on to buy my first home, had my daughter, met my wife in college. We got married in the mid 2000s. But you look at the domino effect, and I would say starting with the opportunity to get a quality education, and then how that sparked so many other life-changing moments for me, right? And I go back to, had I not been able to obtain a scholarship to attend high school, right, how things may have changed for me. And so when I think about wealth creation, it's a grind, but in its simplest form, it's about creating opportunities for us to change the narrative, right? And so wealth creation for me, when I think about it, in the simplest form, is legacy. So it's giving people an opportunity to get a quality education. It's giving people, a lot of times wealth will afford you better healthcare. Wealth will afford you better quality of life in terms of your living situation. And it's having that knowledge and then empowering yourself, your family, your community through that wealth. And so bit of a long answer from me, but that wealth is the game changer. And for me, it really started with how that showed up in a very real way, even with education in high school. You're on mute, Cordero.
There we go. So Anthony, appreciate that response. Jeff, do you want to tackle that topic?
Anthony's gonna be right all the time. So just ready for that. I'll try to add a little kind of a tangential piece to it. I think one of the things that Anthony's talking about, right, is just the idea that in a capitalistic society, finance and financial education and financial literacy, like that's actually the language of our culture. And so having an understanding of finance and being more inclusive and making sure that we're all a part of that growth and that wealth dialogue is extremely important, because actually, when you're in a society, you have to speak the language to be able to navigate yourself through it. And so I look at it more or less as just like it's a language that we all have to be able to speak in order for us to succeed in this country.
And Chairman Hill, you come with a unique perspective as well as, again, you're the chairman. You care to provide any insight to how you look at that topic?
Yeah, I agree with what has been said already. And I think being a Native American and growing up on a reservation and having, humble beginnings as well. My father was a carpenter. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for about the first 10 years. I have 4 younger brothers, so trying to raise 5 boys, I think, is a bit rambunctious. And so kind of going through the social economic ladder, starting off, as I mentioned, having, commodity food and things like that to help supplement so that we could eat. To going to our tribal school system. Oneida Nation operates a pre-K through high school system, and that overlaps many other school districts, public school districts. So it's a little bit difficult, I guess, to say the least, as to attaining high qualified teachers in the school system, and then also the social issues here on the reservation that we continue to deal with, and a lot of that stemming from the federal government's attempts to, strip Native American peoples of their culture and their language. And so, in a sense, being, kind of lost, trying to figure out our identities moving forward in this American life. And so, as we continue to strengthen our ties to our language and our culture through our school system and many public-facing events as well. But then also the challenges of providing a good quality of life for our membership in our community, things like well-paying jobs and access to affordable health care, access to higher education. These are all kind of those building blocks to making sure that a good quality of life can be attained by our membership and the people who live in our community. Many of the things that we do here at Oneida not just affect our tribal members, but the greater community as well, such as our work we've done with the environment.
Thank you for that response. I hit on so many quality topics, and one thing I think I'd like to take a deeper dive on is I think some of the pieces that you hit on the latter end of your response. Talk about opportunity. One, awareness of some of the areas that need to be lifted, and then opportunity, and then access. And so that more so goes to the systemic issues that sometimes prohibit opportunity to grow wealth. And so I want to throw it out to Jeff here to start, just thinking through some of the systemic pieces that piggybacking off Chairman Hill's response that you see in our communities that may block access to growth opportunities.
When I think about systemic issues that arise, a lot of that stems from, history, right? The idea of, from Jim Crow to redlining to the New Deal to, even the Fair Housing Acts, we weren't provided, and just speaking as non-white folks, we weren't provided the same access and the same access, and thereby the same awareness to opportunities that would allow us to grow our wealth. And so one of the biggest issues that I see is just that lack of understanding and that lack of communication, sometimes from generation to generation. And the lack of communication, even in the sense of we're not saying the things that we did that were wrong and telling our kids not to do that, that is not a bigger issue, but that is also that's a large issue that we have to tackle first and foremost. Just having that communication, I can tell you there are times I remember where, there's a pride issue that comes into play sometimes, right? And and this might be a cultural thing, right? If we want to kind of do a deeper dive into it, where, the father doesn't want to talk about some of the ails and issues that they've had to go through, and thereby not reaching their potential, not reaching their dreams. That can thereby then create a kind of an information gap for the child to be able to not think about, well, this is maybe the only opportunity that we have, is only seeing that what dad was able to do or what mom was able to accomplish. Having that opportunity, and Anthony spoke about it, right? Having the opportunity to get to a school that then got him opportunities to go to a college. If you don't have those opportunities, you don't have that access to information, you can't get ahead. And sometimes it's not about what the right information is. It's not about knowing all the right steps. It's knowing that, hey, this step was a wrong step, so just don't do that one, right? I think there's how systemic issues kind of permeate and how they grow is through lack of communication. And I think one of the things that we as a culture, as a society, as Black men or non-white individuals, non-white men need to do more of is making sure that we communicate not just our successes, but also our failures, and how to kind of get around those failures, and how to achieve, just how to get around those failures. Does that answer the question a little bit? I just want to make sure I'm not. Okay.
Absolutely. You hit on a couple. Talk about the redlining, the historic nature of how that keeps wealth from being generated, and then the ability to communicate and share knowledge. And share knowledge is greater than acquired knowledge. You're on a bunch of fantastic topics. So I'm going to throw it over. I know Chairman Hill and Jeff took a lot of the topic, but Anthony, do you want to add anything to that subject?
Yeah, so a couple thoughts, right? So my story that I led off with, Chairman Hill and Jeff, I think really rounded it out well, right? Number one, and I'll probably go back to this several times. When we relocated to Wisconsin 8 years ago, the first thing that we did when we looked to see where we wanted to live, because we had a school-aged daughter that was in the second grade at the time, is we looked at the school report cards, right? And I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of this story. The schools that had the best scorecards in many cases were predominantly white, right? And if you go and you look at it, and I'm based in Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee, in the schools that make up the city of Milwaukee, where you find more diversity, right? We're trying hard to inject resources into those schools so that there can be some equity in that education system for Black and brown folks, for Black and brown kids. But I would say if we don't close that gap from an education standpoint, we're running a race with one leg. That education is, in my opinion, the foundation of everything. You graduate from the education piece, we talk about, grade school, middle school, high school, college, or a trade, and then being able to obtain a job and make a livable wage, right? If you can't get to that opportunity to have a job or to be an entrepreneur, right? Again, you're running a race without all of the resources that you need to really compete in that race, right? And then beyond that, what I would say is, even once you get into that job, or once you figure out the trade, or once you launch a business, and I know Mr. Mack can speak to this well, it's then about how do you have the tools and resources to grow in that career or to scale that business? And I would tell you every step of the way, whether you look at education, you look at, minorities in corporate America, you look at entrepreneurship, right? There's been a disadvantage that's been created over hundreds of years for Black and brown folks. And we're trying hard to close that divide, but wealth, money is at the center of it all. Right? I go back to my story. I had an opportunity to get one of the best educations in the state of Ohio, and ranks highly in the country, but it costs money to get that. UW-Madison is highly acclaimed, right? And I know we love Jeff Mack and his time there, and we still remember him as the guy that played football at UW-Madison, right? But UW-Madison, if you look at it through the lens of Black and brown folks, I think we would agree that we want to see more diversity there, right? So our best and most quality resources, education, careers, access to become an entrepreneur, right? It's missing us. And our ability to obtain wealth is the equalizer for us to begin to really shrink that gap.
So I loved all of those responses, and three completely tied together in theme, but separate ways of looking at it. So appreciate those responses. Anthony, I'm gonna come right back to you with this one. So we've talked a lot about, the education from the youth side on up and building that up and turn that into a trade or a business. But let's say you made it to that point in Wisconsin, so you beat the odds to a degree statistically here, right? And and now you're in a position where you have your business or you are in that profession, and you're starting to grow. And maybe your first generation where you have the ability to grow assets, and you get to that stage where you're kind of in that accumulation phase of life where what's the baseline, you're talking about starting the foundational building blocks of building wealth. What's the baseline things, if you were sitting down with somebody, you advise them that they have to at least consider when you're talking about generational wealth?
Yeah, Jeff hit on this. He talked about us being able to have real conversations and be able to talk candidly about our wins and our failures, right? And I know growing up, there was never a conversation that was had, with my mom or aunts and uncles or grandparents as it pertained to money. And so I graduated from college. I started my first job and I had no idea about anything, right? And I'm kind of feeling my way around in the dark trying to figure it all out. Everything from budgeting to the importance of having a safety net and a savings account, how to approach my first home purchase, to 401k, right? And I would say those are very foundational conversations that have to take place because our personal profile is so important to this wealth conversation, right? Our ability to build a foundation that allows us to have strong credit, savings as a safety net, us to be able to pursue the American dream of owning a home. It all starts with some of those foundational conversations. But again, I think oftentimes those conversations aren't taking place in our community. To Jeff's point, maybe we don't like talking about failures, but I would also say we can't talk about what we haven't experienced. So my mom can coach me on how to go about the home ownership process because she didn't own a home when I got to that stage of life. She had never been a homeowner. I got into corporate America and I had white colleagues that got married and were gifted tens of thousands of dollars from parents and grandparents for their first home purchase. So they step into their new dream home, white picket fence with a ton of equity in it. And guess what? 5-10 years later, they're able to sell that home, in many cases, get a big check, invest it into another home, and they're off to the races. So I go back to this thing of kind of shrinking the knowledge gap and the resource gap and the access gap for Black and brown folks. And I think one, comes back to education, but two, us then having the resources to navigate this process that oftentimes, without the proper help, it's easy to really become a victim, right? And to be someone that's left on the sideline. And we got to avoid that.
And you just hit on one of the other pieces that I think we'll touch on a little bit deeper, but group economics. So you talk about the pooling of capital to help create an equity event out the gate for someone purchasing a home. It's key as well. Chairman Hill, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially when we're talking about home ownership, as I went through some, through our tribal programs as well. When I was a younger person with obviously first growing up living with my parents and then kind of going out on my own a bit, meeting and eventually marrying my wife who was in a HUD home, one of those. It was like a rent to own type program. And so when we were able to pay that off and gain that title, as Mr. Hudson had shared about being able to, sell that home and build a house that we currently live in now that meets the needs of, our particular family. Being married with a blended family, I have 6 children, two my own and or 8 children, 2 of my own and 6 of my wife's. And so our housing need is very particular as it comes into the housing market, and so we end up building our own home because we're able to get that equity out of that first home that we shared. And so being able to, climb that ladder and then and building that knowledge about finance and interest rates and credit, as Mr. Hudson had shared, how important that is, and to take those opportunities when they arise, such as currently with the low mortgage rates for home ownership. And so being able to play that market and keep a finger on that pulse to make sure that you're saving that $500 a month or a couple $100 a month, making sure that you're doing those steps, even though it takes some time and effort to obviously go through a mortgage program, but make and then being able to pull it off with just a little bit of financial education and being able to, as I said, climb that social ladder and figure out what's the best fit for you. My goal isn't to own a mansion or anything like that. I'm actually looking to downsize now that all the kids are adults now, and we have this large house that we don't necessarily need, even though as probably most people of color, their parents' homes are the kind of the revolving door. We had adult kids and their kids moved back in with us. So we had, 3 generations in one household for, the majority. And so a couple of kids move out, a couple other kids move in, and we just try to financially support them through whatever hardships they're facing to get them back on their feet and back out the door as quick as possible. But, that's just kind of life and trying to be flexible to as things change, making sure that we're demonstrating and being an example of what is possible. I think in our own communities, I think is important. And so anytime I get a chance to have a speaking chance like today, I definitely take it and want to make sure that we're sharing as much knowledge and experience as we can with the next generation or the generation before us or after us. I think it's important to build on that community knowledge when it comes to economics and the building of wealth.
100%. Thank you for that response, and I'm going to throw it over to Jeff, the private banking extraordinaire. Not to gas him up at all, but I spent some time in wealth prior to moving into venture capital. And so still within this topic, but it's kind of separate from this topic. So we talk about, a lot of times, and especially now where rates are on the mortgage side, you can buy a home cheaper than sometimes you can rent a home, and then you get equity versus paying for someone else's equity. But one of the things that I feel like gets overlooked very often as you're building that wealth and you're thinking long term for generational wealth is life insurance. So I think you're more dealing with maybe that high end client, or not even that high, but that client is making the jump and progressing through their wealth cycle. How important is it to get life insurance established when you're able?
It's a good question. That's very dependent upon your financial portfolio, I guess I would say. That, to me, there's products, there's a myriad of products out there, right, that every client should, maybe not need, right? Like everything it fits your financial portfolio. There are interest-only loans that were out there, right? The problem was that everybody looked at some of the wrong people got into interest-only loan. Some people, it makes perfect sense. If you got a base salary, but then you get large bonuses at the end of the year, interest only probably works really well for you. If you want an ARM, if you think you're really going to stay in the house for no more than 3 to 5 years, an ARM probably makes a lot more sense for you than a fixed rate. I think people could jump to the fixed rate because, well, that's going to get more detailed than it need to be. But I think there's different strokes for different folks, and for that sense. And for life insurance, I think there's a value play to it. But I would say, I may take life insurance because I like the protection that it provides, right? But then I can tell you, my financial advisor and a number of different people will say that's not the right idea to go into, because the amount of money, if it's whole life versus term, if it's term, it's going to shut off at some point in time. You're just giving money away. If it's whole you're putting a bigger chunk in, and could that money be spent better elsewhere? Could it be in the stock market that makes a base return of 7% or something like that, versus you put your money into a life insurance policy and it won't make that, or it's actually your money, you don't have the ability to get that money back out. So there's kind of that opportunity cost of those funds. So, but it works out for you in the long haul. So, I mean, I think it's all really kind of based on your overall financial portfolio and what makes sense for you individually. It's not a great answer, but because I can't really be specific, because it all depends on who's in front of me when I'm talking to them about it.
And I don't want to put you in a regulatory bind either. So
yeah, I'm not a financial advisor. Actually, I should put that up there.
Any regulators out there who did not give specific investment advice.
That's right.
He's good.
Cordero, I will say this in the spirit of, Henry said that we could be real here and we can be our authentic selves. I don't disagree with anything that Jeff Mack just said. What I will say is oftentimes, and I'm only talking about my own personal experience, I'm seeing Black friends and relatives pass away and us not be able to afford the funeral costs, right? And what I would say is, at a minimum, unless you're someone who is independently wealthy, I would say you got to have some type of insurance solution in place, right? My mom's specific words to me is, I got a policy enough for you to bury me. I'm not trying to make you and your brother rich. That's one. That's one way to look at it, right? And I'm thankful that at least she has something in place to take care of her services, and perfectly we're a long ways away from that. But I think we got to get comfortable with talking about death, because it's going to happen, right? And so the bigger conversation is, how do we plan for that? And so it was a conversation that my wife and I had several years ago. We took what we felt was a big trip to Hawaii. And something was put on my spirit where I said, I didn't want us to get on the plane. And I'm sure there was probably something that happened in the news at that point, but I didn't want us to take that big trip without being really clear that if we were not to return, how was my daughter going to be taken care of? And what do we have in place to ensure that she didn't lack or go without? So that's insurance. That's a planning conversation. It's wealth planning and estate planning to some degree. But I would say there's different levels. At the first level, what I would say is everyone should have something in place that if something happened to you today, we're not having to do a GoFundMe. Right? And I'd say as you continue to grow in wealth, that conversation gets a bit more complex, but that conversation should continue to grow with you as your wealth grows.
I love that answer. Love all the answers. And it's a great capstone of that topic. I'm glad we were able to discuss insurance, because I do think you hit a couple of things on the head that I've seen in our community as well. That's totally avoidable. And some of us, look at a term life even, it's not expensive to have in place, talking $20, $30 a month. And again, you look at group economics, sometimes you even pay for that amongst the siblings and have something in place as a nest egg too, to kind of kickstart some of that wealth. So I kind of want to, obviously right now, I want to pivot a little bit into a topic around, is it ever too early, too late to start? Stock market is going crazy right now. You got Coinbase, everybody's talking about Coinbase and Bitcoin. And so kind of want to, I'll start with Jeff on this. But just as you're thinking through, when does it really start working towards, building wealth? When does that planning start? When are those seeds set? And then, you look at like Robinhood, and we had a lot of people participating in Robinhood, but as people start to try to activate and get involved in the market, what's some steps that they should take prior to taking that dive? So it's a two-part question.
Yeah. Since HUD said we can keep it real, I'm just going to keep it real there. Like,
keep it real.
So think of it this way, right? If you are thinking about Coinbase Bitcoin, GameStop, all that stuff right now because you saw it on TV, you're late. So think of it this way. So all my family was from the East Coast, right? So I would get like I watch Yo MTV Raps, or I watch Rap City or something like that, and back in the day, and I'd be like, yo, man, this cat Biggie's crazy. So I'd go to New York and I'd be like, yo, man, hey, y'all heard about this cat Biggie? They'd be like, what are you talking about? Like he's like last year, like that was last year. You know what I mean? You gotta check out this Jay-Z cat. Like what? You're too late to the party if the news is telling you that it's good, that this is something you want to jump into. So let's not like you're too far ahead of yourself. Like just take a step back, like recenter yourself, and like your focus might just be simply like, let's just pay off your debt. You got some debt, let's just pay that down. You know what I mean? Like Chairman Hill said, like, he got to his next house by paying off his current house, or by paying off the house that he and his wife lived in. There's ways of, like, I think we try and make things, there's a cool quote that it was on a movie Sicario, and it's Benicio del Toro character says something like, the lady's trying to ask these questions and trying to get real deep dive into like what's going on. And he's like, look, you're trying to figure out how a watch works. Just tell time, right? Like we're going, sometimes we jump too far to where we actually are at. Like we just need to focus on the stuff that we deal with right now, that we got to handle right now. Some of it to me is like this, like I think of two principles, right? Two principles of profit, success, any financial goal is about maximizing profitability, minimizing your expenses. So there's two ways to make money in a sense, right? Minimizing your expenses, or making more money, putting more, if you sell something, instead of it costing $1, make it cost $2. But the other way of doing it is paying off the debt to where what you then make from that profit or from that sale, you keep all of it. So, when I think of that, I think of my own financial portfolio. It's like, hey, I can make more money, but at some point in time, I'm going to reach the precipice of it, right? Where else can I actually make money is in mitigating and minimizing my debt structure, right? So whatever I got out there, just pay that off. Because now that means any money that I make, I actually keep. So there's that piece. And then the other piece that I always think about that I think we need to always make sure we have in the back of our mind or in the front of our mind is about actions, and action speaking loud, being louder than words, doing it instead of just talking about it. And I think about like the recycling of the dollar, black business, the black recycle of the dollar, being able to put your money back into your community, be able to put your money back into the places that you reside. That is extremely important as well, because everything we do, we always talk about the community and our culture. And while we're not monolithic, we are tied to each other from a cultural perspective. And we have a lot of similar experiences. What we need to make sure we do is pick ourselves up, make sure that we're taking care of each other, making sure that I do my damnedest to make sure that I'm gonna make sure that I give back to Henry and Madison 365 if I got some dough to give back to. Make sure that I'm going to buy from a business that looks and resembles some of the cultural things that I take pride in. Those are little things that I think about. So while I deviated from the topic of the Coinbase type of stuff. I mean, again, don't get me wrong. If you want to invest in Bitcoin, that's great. Tell me what you're buying. Tell me what you're going to do with it. If you have no other information about Bitcoin and Coinbase versus just what you read, then you probably don't want to get into it, because now you're speculative investing, right? And that's just something that I think if you have your car paid off first, don't worry about that. You know what I mean?
100%. No, I you just hit on the underlying theme more so relates to, and we talk about it in the financial world of planning, right? So again, maybe it is getting some of that debt off your back and then taking that money and doing something with it that can guarantee you dollars back, and almost like snowballing those funds. So as you maybe take that money that now you've used to pay off one debt and apply it to another debt, get that paid down. and now you have more capital freed up to maybe invest in something. But first, you got to get to that point before you can participate in others' points. So, Anthony, I see your mute sign came off, so I'm going to throw it to you.
No, Jeff is spot on. I'm a fan of the craze around Robinhood and some of the things that taken place recently with GameStop and people talking cryptocurrency. I think it's good because there's more people educating themselves. But to Jeff's point of like, you just need to tell time, right? When he said that, for me, it's you gotta budget, right? You got to make sure that you're making more and bringing in more than you're spending. You got to make sure that you're taking care of some of those foundational blocks, whether it's planning for education, if you have children, if it's life insurance, right? If it's around healthcare, depending on where you are in the life cycle. If you have an opportunity to invest in a 401k, oftentimes companies match you there, and that's free money up to a certain point of that match. And I just think some of those foundational things, again, I'll use my own story. When I started my banking career in 2003, my mom had never talked to me about a 401k. She never talked to me about the importance of a match because she had never lived it, right? So a bit of this is us educating ourselves to understand how to play the game. But then once you know, bless you, Cordero, once you know, you got to take action, right? Like, just tell time in the sense of like, let's get the basics right. Because I've had school teachers, retired school teachers as clients that have retired with, a couple $1,000,000. And it wasn't because they were working for a school where they were making $250,000 a year. It's because they ran a really tight budget and they saved a lot more than they spent. It's a simple concept, but it's powerful for those that can master that.
Huge. Thanks for taking that dive. Chairman Hill, do you have anything you want to add to that topic?
Yeah, I think, what was stated, I believe as well. And so, even, the 401k, match, employer match, that's free money, and again, that's the value of that compounding interest too, as well. So trying to make sure that people are aware that it's probably a pretty good idea that if someone's trying to give you some money, you take it and sign up for that employer 401k match or whatever type of benefit program that they have in place. As obviously there's a lot of talk of Social Security benefits have been flowing over the last couple of decades, and retirement ages being pushed back. So I really think it's incumbent upon each one of us individually to assure our own financial security as to the best we can where possible. And so, I also share that advice as well too, that, it's important that we take care of the basics and making sure that, we're carrying a low debt load. I understand, people have mortgages and they have vehicle payments and things like that. And then obviously credit cards as well, but trying to make sure that we manage those as best we can. Because the higher we have the debt, the more interest you're paying to someone else, and that's money out of your pocket. So just as I mentioned before about, rolling over that house mortgage to the more current lower rates, and, saving 1 or 1.5% might not seem like a lot until you look at it over the year. You're like, well, I've saved about $10,000 this past year by getting a better interest rate on whether it's a credit card or a mortgage. So I think it's just important that that knowledge is transferred, and I try to do the best with my own kids that starting this government job and being offered 401k, and back in 2008 during the financial crisis is when I essentially got into the market. And so being able to my own personal story is investing the max match, and so and that grew, and I was able to show that to the kids, like, hey, it's important that you understand your ability. If you have an employer that offers us 401k, this is possible, and to do all that you can to assure your financial security for the long term. And so I always try to make sure that I'm sharing, my own personal story, and obviously as the markets, stock markets rise and fall as well. But you're in there for the long haul, and you just got to look at that. For me, probably another 20, 25 years. What is that going to grow to? Over that span, and keep that in mind.
100%. Thank you for that. And so we have basically 14, 15 minutes left here. And so I'm going to tackle a couple of questions from the audience, but they do have a tie to a question we were going to ask anyway. So this works out great. I'm going to pick on the banks a little bit here. All right. So talking about, you've seen where some banks have been red flag for not having locations in, serving all of the communities that they are in. We see sometimes the service fees price certain segments of society out, and et cetera. So we talk about our community. A lot of our communities don't even necessarily trust banks at the rate of other communities. And so I'm going to start with Anthony on this one. I think we have a unique perspective. We have, I come from the banking industry, and Jeff and Anthony work currently in the banking industry. Chairman Hill, they started a bank to meet the needs of their community. So I think we have some different perspective on this, but there's a couple of topics that's in the chat here. So we're talking about, other ways outside of leveraging, a CD or money market from the bank where the rates aren't great right now just because of the market to grow wealth. And then, talking about how to work with professionals in the bank. So I just think I wanted, if you could tackle one, what's the state of the banking system currently? Like, do you feel comfortable letting your grandparents bank in a bank? Two, what are ways that the consumer can activate in the bank in a meaningful way? And then with COVID, how has that evolved the way the bank interaction happens?
Yeah, Cordell, I'll take a stab at this, and certainly go over to Chairman Hill and Jeff. Listen, I understand the history, and Jeff pointed to that in one of his earlier comments. I understand the history and why there has been a lack of trust historically in banks from the Black and brown community. What I will say is we, and I'm speaking for those on this screen right now, we're working really hard to do our part to close those gaps. I think it's really important for everyone. Just as important as when I could grow hair, my barber was really important to me, right? I think all three of you still have barbers. I'm a little envious. My barber was very important to me. He was a professional that I saw weekly, right? I would say you got to have a team of professionals that make your world go round. And to not have a banker in that group, I think is a big miss, right? Banking, whether it's on the personal side, in terms of if you're early on, maybe how to start that budget, maybe it's advising you on how to purchase a home, which oftentimes is our largest personal asset. Maybe it's because you're a small business owner or a commercial business owner, and you have a business banker that's helping you to execute on your growth plan, right? Retirement wise, talking about the wealth plan, right? And a financial advisor. I don't care where you are in your journey, to navigate life without having a professional to help you through that. I would at least say in our community, it'd be taboo for you to be able to grow hair and then just walk into a barbershop and let anybody cut your hair. First thing we got to Wisconsin, my wife said, where am I going to get my hair done? Right? But we don't approach our finances with that same mentality of, I'd be damned if I just go out here on my own and try to cut my own hair or do my own finances. Like we have to take it with that same kind of importance. And I will say, if you do your research, I think there's, a lot of Jeff Macks today that are passionate about helping our communities and providing that knowledge and that expertise to help to close the gap that we know exists. Jeff, Chairman Hill, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this as well.
I can go, Chairman Hill. Is that all right? Okay. Yeah, I mean, the barber analogy, man, is perfect. Like I gotta steal that. That's gonna be mine in like all I gotta do is say it like 4 times, and it'll come off clean. That'll be mine. But no. But I mean, HUD's right. Like, to me, you know, having a banker or a financial advisor is necessary because it provides you a soundboard, someone that actually knows the craft, right? So it allows you to speak with somebody, ask questions, and that person has to have some type, if not, I mean, I believe they have to have some type of, I can't think, it's not attorney-client privilege, but they have to be, it's a private conversation. So you can ask questions that's not going to be strewn out into to social media or anything like that. So you can learn kind of quietly, which is, I think, the best way to learn. And I think there's this kind of misnomer, this idea that, that the rich, the dad at the dinner table sits down and talks to his kids about stock market and what their banking portfolio is supposed to look like. That may happen, but it doesn't happen quite as often as people think it does. What happens is kids learn through osmosis, right? They see that they live in a house. So they think, okay, that's my goal, is to live in a house. They see that both my parents went to college. I guess that means I have to go to college. They see what you do. It's not what you say. It's what you actually do, your actions. And that's what teaches your children, oh, this is the path. So now kind of taking it to the banking side, what I look at, right, when there was a question that was posed about like, do you invest, like what should you invest in stocks or bonds or real estate? And all those things are good ideas. And I look at stocks sometimes, I look at financial advisors sometimes as, I don't know the return. I can't look at all the I don't know how to say it, what prospectuses like how my allocation and all that stuff is. I trust that I got a guy that's going to take care of me in that respect. But where I also win on that is in the relationships and the networks that he has, that he kind of allows me to get access into. And I think that's something that's kind of the little secret that nobody thinks about is business is all about relationships, and relationships are all about networking, and networking is all about making sure that person trusts you and feels like you're a good guy or a good girl. Wrong. Girl is not the right term to say. This is a men's leadership, right? So I'm just gonna knock that out. I'm just gonna talk about guys, but is a good guy, right? And so from that respect, that person also allows you the opportunity to get in front of other people that might have access to other opportunities, financial opportunities. Hey, here's I'm about to go invest in this over here, or hey, there's this fund here that I've been thinking about that might be a good plan. Or it's like just like job opportunities. Like, yo, man, I've been looking for X, Y, or Z. And you may be a guy like, hey, I could do that. Or hey, can I sit down and even talk about that option? It opens up your world to other people that can help grow and help build your overall portfolio. And so when I look at I look at the reason for banking and the reason for financial advisory, it's for those reasons, not just like, hey, I can park my money somewhere. Hey, I can invest in something like this. Like I have to look at how does everything I do create multiple streams of opportunity and thereby then income. So, I mean, I try and think of things in that respect, I guess I would say to the audience. Because I think that if you look at things that way, I think you can start to see even more value add, or you can negate sometimes like the idea of like, hey, I got to pay this guy, a point or something like that on all my investments or all my money that I give, and like he didn't do anything but put it into a mutual fund. Well, then use him for more. Have him, he going to golf outings, go to a golf outing. He going out to eat dinner. Like ask him to like, hey, can you teach me? Can I pick your brain on some things? Can I meet with some of your other clients? Like, I think those are ways to grow your worth, or not your worth. I'm sorry, to grow the opportunity and to use your money wisely in ways that not everybody else is doing.
Gotcha. Appreciate that, Jeff. And Chairman Hill, can you take 2 minutes to maybe add to that thought process?
really building those relationships with your bank and financial advisor, I think, are important steps to increasing that knowledge, as Mr. Mack was just sharing, and really building those relationships with that technical expert. As I currently work in government, so I don't have time to, as Mr. Mack is pouring over prospectuses and the volatility of the markets and things like that. And so it's really important that you build that relationship with those technical experts. That's their job to do that and to have your best interest in mind. And I think one way to expand that knowledge is really get to know that person or that entity, to build that knowledge and that relationship. I can walk into my local bank, and I know the tellers, I know the president, the vice president, and they know me by first name, and being able to build upon those relationships. My son, who was 20, wanted to get his first, actually his second car loan, but in his own name, so I didn't have to co-sign. So I was looking forward to that. And so being able to walk into my bank and be like, here's my son, he wants to, roll this joint loan over into just his name because he wants to take that full responsibility. Now, is that a possibility? And so, him being able to, get his own auto loan at, age 20, I think is a good step. And part of that is those relationships that you build, on a personal level with those professionals. So you building credit with them, and they're building credit with you, so that, if there's kind of a gray area, they're more willing to take that little extra step and say, yeah, I think that's possible. We can work with this. And again, that's really, I think, important as we continue, as much of the topics I've covered is really about that relationship building and the education components of it. So if you have that relationship, they're definitely going to be giving you some advice here and there that you probably wouldn't normally get from your family member or your cousin or whatever it might be, because they're really in that technical expert area, and they want to see you succeed, and that helps them succeed.
100%. I appreciate all the topics. So we're closing up on our hour together, and I feel like we can keep talking about this topic and the different nuances within this topic for hours. A couple of recap pieces. So one, you gotta find your barber. All right. So that's one of my favorite takeaways of this, right? You wouldn't travel to California from Milwaukee, get in the car and just drive, right? You're going to put the destination in the GPS and map out those coordinates. So planning is vital, and having someone to help you plan that you trust matters. The education piece continued to come up throughout the conversation, and statistically, those with at least an associate's degree, they tend to make almost $1 million more in lifetime earnings than those without. And that includes having a trade. That includes any type of certifications. Any added on education on top of high school always equals out to more money. It's a statistical fact, and in our community, that matters even more. The average age of an entrepreneur is 42 years old. So again, as you have ideas, sometimes ownership leads to your generational opportunity, and being in a position to use your worldly experiences to maybe carve out a niche in the market. And so I just always encourage people, don't be afraid to make that leap sometimes to chase a dream that you may have always had. The last piece is, I think, awareness and access and opportunity. So again, it's one thing for you to make it, but who are you bringing with you as you go along your journey? And then the other piece is, again, group economics, group resources, sharing that knowledge with others, bringing others in. We always talk about your circle of friends, right? So I feel like I've made some of my best decisions with as I've been on my growth journey, based on being able to have conversations with people that I trust, that have earned my respect and that I've earned their respect, and just the way they approach business and their decision making. And so surrounding yourself with people that maybe don't think like you, but are driven like you in regards to that wealth journey. And I'll add the last piece, mental health is wealth as well. So again, if you're going through that process and you're just chasing the dollar and you're not well-rounded as a person, you can get lost in that chase as well. So I want to thank Madison 365 for continuing to put it together, these great panels and this great work, Henry and his team. And we appreciate you guys. To our distinguished panelists, we thank you for your time and energy. Really appreciate you guys. And then for those that tuned in and listen, thank you for your support and continued efforts. And we wish you the best on your pursuit of wealth.
This is 365 Media.